Hello, it's me again, King Philidor, and now we're back to talk about the super duper following part of checks and captures, part 2.0, or whatever it is. I'm just having some fun with you. So now we're on to our new paradigm, which is every check and every capture every time, regardless of what you think, whether they can take you or not, whether it makes sense or not, for kings and queens and rooks to see where everybody can and cannot go. So in in checks and captures 2, we took and showed you a queen who got attacked by a rook in a situation where if we were only looking for one dignitary, we had one check. When we started looking for all 4 dignitaries, we had 12 checks. And checking the queen turned out to be the way that we took and found the solution to the problem. Well, now let's see what happens when we start talking about checking one of the rooks. So if we're looking at this diagram, and I hope you are, and I know you're sitting there with your checks and captures eye going, oh man, they're going to take my queen, they're going to take my queen, they're going to take my queen, what can I do, what can I do? Rook takes, no, man, they're going to get out of it. But really, they don't have to get out of it. So let's look at how many checks we have using our new system. So again, we do the same rotation. It's queen, rook, bishop, knight, pawn. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with the queen. And then this comes up to be number 6 with the queen. And then we've got 1 with the rook, so that's 7. And then we've got a total of 8, 9, 10, and then this one doesn't have any. And we got 11. So we have 11 checks. Now, if we were only looking at the king, we'd have 2 checks. So again, the whole point of this is we got 4 dignitaries on the board. It's a finite board. It's only 8 by 8. And a lot of these pieces can't fight you off all by themselves. And remember, when you're talking about the queen, when you're talking about the bishop, when you're talking about the rook, they go from one end of the board to the other end of the board in just one move. So they're highly mobile. So this is probably going to want to be one of the shorter videos, in that we just want to get to it, because I want to get to that next video I promised you, where we're going to take a look at a game and see how this actually comes into play with one of the most popular openings being played right now in the world, and how one little mistake can lead to a queen chase that just runs you all over the place. So I left this position sitting up at a tournament because what I do is I go to tournaments and I do post-round analysis. So there were players there rated anywhere from 200 and 300 all the way up to some of the coaches there who were rated 18, 1900, and 2000. I left this puzzle sitting up all day, and nobody could solve it. By the 4th round, I had to take and go ahead and just give everybody the solution. And the reason is, they're not armed with the information I'm arming you with. And that's, they kept trying to figure out how to save their queen, they kept trying to figure out how this would end in mate and everything else like that. And they were too materialistic. Looking at the checks and captures for kings and queens and rooks isn't supposed to be about you taking the kings and queens and rooks. It's supposed to be about finding the most important, fastest, most powerful pieces that can be used to checkmate you and see where they can and cannot go. I mean, you just got to realize how important that is. So here, while I've been just going on with the jibs, hopefully you've been looking at the position trying to figure it out. And if you're coming on board with what we're talking about, you'll find that check is the answer. I know you're going, so if this is your first video and you didn't decide to watch them in order, you're going, that's not check. If we're looking at checks for kings, queens, and rooks, that's a check. Okay, now let's find out how black deals with this. The king has no escape squares, and I'm threatening here. Rook takes rook. If the rook moves anywhere off of here, then I simply go here and it's mate. So by looking for the checks for against the rook, we find out where this rook cannot go. The queen would have never found out where it couldn't go. The bishop would have never found out where it couldn't go. The bishop and the knight would have never found out where it could or couldn't go. The only person who could find out where this piece could or could not go was the rook. And the only way that does that is by challenging it to stay where it is. If the pawn takes, we come up here, queen check. If the pawn takes, we still come up here, queen check. Now the fun part. If the rook comes up here, we still go queen check. And that's triple check. See that when it comes to a king, the most you can have is a double check. But once we start looking for the kings and queens and rooks, you can have double check. You can have triple check. You can have quadruple check. You can have centuple check. You can have a check for every direction that piece goes, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Queen goes in 8 directions, which means you can actually take and have octuple checks. Now come on, if you're looking for octuple checks, I forget the thing for 7, and the sextuple checks, and the synctuple checks, and the quadruple checks, and the triple checks, and your opponent is only looking for single checks and double checks, and you're looking for 4 people and they're only looking for 1 person, come on. Sooner or later, something has to give. But again, they're looking for these checks. Is this a matter of skill? No. Is it a matter of brilliance? No. Is it a matter of creativity? No. It's a matter of having the correct system, the correct paradigms, and some discipline. That's why RCI players that are trained consistently outperform people who just play, because they study and they have the right paradigm. Here, after rook takes, mate. Short and sweet. And you're going to hear me talking about this a lot more, is the black, white, black, white, black, and the white, black, white, white, black, white that we talked about before. This meets the paradigm. This is a white, black, white, black, white. You have to be able to see 2.5 moves ahead. If you have to take and look and calculate every possible move in a position, trying to see 2 and 3 and 4 moves ahead, you're going to have a miserable existence. Look at how many possibilities there are in this position. Even if we start with the queen, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. There's 14 just with the queen. And then we got 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. Oh my goodness. But when you start just looking for the dignitaries, we come back to just our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Narrow it down. Go after the most important people. Go for people that they're not looking for. Let yourself do a double check, a triple check, a quadruple check, a centuple check, a sextuple check, octuple check. But let yourself have an open mind about what's going on with the board. And I'm King Philidor. I'll see you soon. Leave me a comment. Subscribe. Bye-bye.